Hello my friends and welcome back. Ultimus here, bringing you another video today looking at the different racials. Racials have been updated, changed around, moved around, altered because many of the racials before have been outdated or minimalized because some of the stats they affected have been done away with. Much of the expertise racials obviously would be irrelevant and pointless because expertise is gone. Hit, all those things of that sort, and so Blizzard did a complete overhaul of some of the different races and their racials. Some things have stayed the same, some things have changed, and so this video is going to be taking a look at all the different races and just showing off and displaying the new racials that they have, and maybe even giving some of my thoughts on them. So first we're going to start off with humans because my main is a human warrior, so I'm being selfish and I'm going first. First racials, as you know, because expertise has been done away with, so has our mace and sword specialization. No more expertise, so there's no point in that. Our diplomacy still remains the same. Reputation gains are increased by 10%. Every man for himself, that's the one that has everybody up in arms and still angry at us. I figure if you're going to be playing a race that's as boring and mundane as a human, you gotta have something to make it a little bit flavorful, so that's my logic behind that one. Every man for himself is basically the free trinket racial that allows us to remove all snares and stuns from ourselves, and it is on a 2-minute cooldown. Then we have the human spirit, which has replaced the spirit buff and instead gives us versatility. This I find more interesting than every man for himself. While every man for himself is good and is a fantastic talent, and it is worth rolling human because you can get those double DPS trinkets, it's fabulous. I've seen just as many people be successful in PvP without it. However, the plus 100 to versatility I think is going to be more handy than any other racial that we could have at this point. Versatility, if you're unfamiliar with the stat, it's a new secondary stat that has been included, which basically increases the damage you do by a certain amount. It decreases the damage you take by a certain amount, and it also increases the healing you do, I believe. So it basically is a great stat to have, and I think we're going to see it a lot in early PvP when it comes to Warlords of Draenor, as everybody's gearing up and trying to get that Glad gear. So those are the two big ones, every man for himself and the human spirit. But that's about it for humans as of right now. Taking a look now at the Draenei. Draenei still holding on to Gift of the Naru, which is a heal that heals the target for 20% of the caster's total health over 5 seconds. So whatever you're targeting, whoever you're targeting is going to receive a heal, 1 tick every 5 seconds for 20% of your total health. As of right now, the way that's looking on game is that's ticking for close to 10k, and it can crit, and when it crits it gets close to 20k. It crits for about 19k, so it's pretty strong. Only drawback is that it is on a 3-minute cooldown, so it's kind of lengthy, but I feel like in any position, any little heals like that can help and definitely pull you out of a sticky situation, whether it's PvE or PvP. So as you can see there, ticking for 9, oh there's the 19k, 9,800, 9,800. And I would imagine that would scale with your healing and your intellect stats if you're a healer or a caster class. Still have gem cutting, which increases your jewel crafting skill by 10. Now this one's interesting only because every other race, all of their profession buffing racials, they increase their skill in that profession by 15, whereas Draenei are stuck with that 10. So it's kind of interesting that that's staying that way. I'm not sure if it'll be changed by the time this hits live, but there it is for now. Talking about shadow resistance, because it's definitely lackluster compared to heroic presence, but just to get it out of the way, reduces shadow damage taken by 1%. Shadow Priests are terrified of you now. But then Heroic Presence has been changed, no longer increasing hit by 1%, but now it increases your strength, agility, and intellect by 65, and this does scale with level. Now what is not mentioned in the tooltip is whether or not this affects party members like Heroic Presence used to, increasing all your party members hit by 1%. It'd be really cool if it did, because no matter who you're playing with, that's going to benefit and definitely buff them. But regardless, having that buff to yourself is nice and some pretty strong incentive to play a Draenei. Any kind of buff to your main stat is always a good thing in my opinion. Let's take a look now at the Tauren racials. Tauren racials still looking pretty strong in my opinion. Still holding on to War Stomp. 0.5 second cast, 2-minute cooldown, stuns up to 5 enemies within 8 yards for 2 seconds. Definitely, I think, or an underappreciated racial, I think. It's obviously not the cream of the crop racial, but it has its usefulness in its right places, and I've seen it turn games around, so pretty cool that Tauren are still getting to hang on to that one. Next one is Braun. This is one of their new racials that I think is pretty fabulous. And it is a critical strike bonus to damage and healing by 2%. Now it isn't the critical strike chance of your healing and damage, but it is the bonus. So whatever your critical strike damage is after the crit is enabled, basically its damage is increased by 2%. So any classes that rely heavily on crit damage is pretty awesome, and I think you're going to see Taurens be an excellent choice for them. As far as I'm concerned, I think they'll make great warriors, hunters, druids, things of that sort. I think will be fabulous. I think will be great. Cultivation, herbalism skill increased by 15, and you gather herbs faster than normal herbalists. So as opposed to the Draenei, which has the increase of 10 to their jewel crafting, all the other races have the 15. It's quite interesting, I think. Endurance increases your stamina. This is at level 100, so I would imagine at level 1 and up through level 100, you're not going to have that 190 buff to the stamina because it does scale with level. But it's nice, and I think this is what's going to make Tauren still a solid bet for anybody who wants to roll a tank spec class. And of course, more health is always nice, regardless of what you're playing, PvP or PvE. And then lastly, but probably most underwhelming, reduces nature damage taken by 1%, and that is nature resistance. Taking a look at Night Elves. Night Elves still have Shadow Meld, which lets them slip into the shadows and be stealth for a bit. Can't move, can't attack really anything during, but it's a nice way to remove aggro from yourself, or camp a flag or a node in PvP and get the element of surprise on someone, especially as a warrior. Get that stealth charged on them is quite nice. And the only one that's really strange to me for Night Elves is elusiveness. It reduces the chance enemies have to detect you while you're Shadow Melded. This seems extremely redundant to me. Why not just increase your stealth effect on Shadow Meld and then just do away with this racial or replace it with something else? I don't know, it just seems pointless. It almost makes it sound like you had a choice in taking it as if you wanted to buff your Shadow Meld, but you really don't, because it comes baseline because you're a Night Elf. So it seems strange that it's there in the first place to me. Maybe that's just me. Nature resistance reduces nature damage taken by 1%. Quickness increases your chance to dodge melee and ranged attacks by 2%, and your movement speed is increased by 2%. So baseline as a Night Elf, you're going to move 2% quicker, and then your dodge chance against melee and range attacks goes up. So this is making you a great tank spec, I think. Night Elf warriors rejoice, and rogues, hunters, monks, anyone that relies on dodge, you're going to see that buff there as well. So quite a nice racial, I think. Touch of Elune, by far the most interesting racial to Night Elves, and as far as I'm concerned, quite possibly even one of the most interesting to me out of all of the ones added in Warlords of Draenor. I like the immersion factor to it. I like the way it changes gameplay up depending on what type or depending on what time of day you're playing. There have been quite a few players who've been kind of crying about it, complaining about it, saying that it punishes them for playing at a certain time of the day or whatever, but I don't really see that it's that big of a deal. It's only a 1% increase one way or the other, but it's definitely cool. It adds some fun to being a Night Elf and just adds some different, and I think it adds a level of depth to the game that wasn't there before. So it'd be cool if we saw more of that across the board for some of the other races. And then lastly, Wisp Spirit, which transforms you into a wisp upon death, increases your speed by 75%. Next, let's look at Dwarves. Dwarves still hold on to Stone Form, removes all poison, disease, curse, magic, and bleed effects, and reduces all physical damage taken by 10% for 8 seconds. So definitely a strong racial in my opinion. 2-minute cooldown works great for it. Removing all of those debuffs on you is fabulous, especially with the way Affliction Warlocks are doing damage, especially the way Fire Mages are putting dots up on you. Rogue poisons, Warrior Rend back, and how it ticks for that big burst at the end there. Definitely nice to be able to remove those things from you and reduce the damage you take by 10% for 8 seconds. So pretty strong talent, I feel personally. Again, not game breaking, but still a nice perk to have. Explorer, where you find additional fragments when looting archaeological finds, and you can survey faster than normal archaeologists. So nice little buff to archaeology there if you're into that sort of thing. Frost resistance reduces the frost damage taken by 1%. And then Might of the Mountain, basically the same thing as the Tauren racial of Brawn. Critical strike bonus damage and healing increased by 2%. So definitely going to see nice little bonuses there to dwarves to their damage. I think this is going to make dwarves an excellent choice for hunters personally. Warriors, hunters, all that sort. Just that increased critical strike damage is always a great thing. Let's take a look now at the undead. Still holding on to Cannibalize. When activated, regenerates 7% of total health and mana every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. It only works on humanoid undead corpses within 5 yards. Any movement, action, or damage while cannibalizing will cancel the effect. So basically it's a nice regeneration effect there on anyone, and this works on players as well as NPCs. Will of the Forsaken, bit rough on that 3-minute cooldown. I think definitely could see a reduction down to 2 minutes with so many other similar racials down to 2 minutes. But it removes any charm, fear, and sleep effect on you. This effect shares a 30-second cooldown with any other similar effects. Still nice being able to break any CC like that is always a good thing, but especially when the Nome one is on 1-minute cooldown, Every Man for Himself is on 2-minute cooldowns. Will of the Forsaken seems a bit harsh to be stuck on a 3-minute cooldown. Shadow resistance. reduces shadow damage taken by 1%. And Touch of the Grave. Your attacks and damaging spells have a chance to drain the target, dealing 2,140 or 24 shadow damage, and healing you for the same amount. I don't know if that scales with your gear. I would imagine it would, as most of these racials like this do, but kind of nifty. It only has a chance to proc, so it's not consistent, and I don't believe it scales with the leech stat you can stat as a secondary stat, because it is not considered a leech or called a leech, identified as such in the talent, but still a little bit of lifesteal is kind of cool. Obviously not game breaking because that's not a massive number, but still a cool dynamic, I think, to the game. Looking at trolls now, trolls still, I think, have some of the best, if not arguably the best, and they were for a while through vanilla up and through Mist of Pandaria. I don't know if really still considered so. I'm not that good at theory crafting, but they definitely have some of the strongest racial talent sets I've seen. So still holding on to Beast Slaying, which increases your experience gained by 20% when killing beasts. So any dungeons, any quests you're out there doing, you get that 20% buff to your experience from them. So faster leveling, always a perk. Berserking increases your haste by 15% for 10 seconds, and that is on a 3-minute cooldown. So any class that benefits heavily from haste, you're going to see be an excellent choice to roll the troll for that one. The Voodoo Shuffle reduces the duration of all movement impairing effects by 15%. Anything like that in any of your races is always great. Same thing with the Orc that reduces stun effects by 10%. Reducing any movement impairing effects on you by 15% is great. So excellent ratio there for troll. And then lastly, health regeneration rate is increased by 10% because of regeneration. That also causes 10% of total health regeneration to continue during combat. So whatever your health regeneration rate is standard, it's going to be increased by 10%, but then 10% of your health regen is allowed to continue through combat, which for any other race would cease until you are removed from combat. So the regeneration is quite nice, the haste buff is quite nice, experience buff is nice, and being slowed down less often is just fabulous. So trolls are a great choice, I think, no matter what class you're playing. Orcs, still big and bad, definitely some brutish racials here. Blood Fury increases your attack power for 15 seconds, and that is on a 2-minute cooldown. And that does change to spell power if you're playing like a warlock or a mage or like a caster class or such. So it's kind of cool. Just overall increases the healing or damage output that you're going to be doing. And pairing that with command, which causes your pet damage to be increased by 1%. So overall, just big numbers from orcs. They're in there. They're ready to dig their heels in and get up to their elbows in the blood of their enemies. Just very crazy heavy damage race. Hunters, warriors, doesn't matter. You're just going to see lots of damage for them. Then hardiness, duration of stun effects is reduced by an additional 10%. So very similar to the trolls, a very strong talent. Taking a look now at the Pandaren. Move out of my way, Tarn. I'm recording a video here. Quaking Palm. Pandaren still get a hold on to Quaking Palm. It has a 2-minute cooldown. It strikes the target with lightning speed, incapacitating them for 4 seconds, and turns off your auto attack. So basically, once you incapacitate them, it turns off your attack so that you don't immediately remove them from that incapacitation. You just place them in. Quite nice. Most stuff like this you have to glyph for, but it's kind of cool that it comes baseline attached to your racial. Bouncy, you take half the fall damage, which is quite nice if you're prone to falling off cliffs or buildings or automatically accidentally dismounting yourself like I am. Epicurean, your love for food allows you to receive 100% more of the stats from well-fed effects. So whatever you're getting from food, sitting down, eating for that 10 seconds, you're going to get double what everyone else is. Gourmand, your cooking skill is increased by 15. And then Inner Peace, you earn twice as much rested experience. So your rested experience bonus is going to last twice as long, which again definitely eases up on that leveling grind quite nicely. Taking a look now at Gnomes. Gnomes still get their Escape Artist, which is crazy because it is on a 1-minute cooldown. Escape the effect of any immobilization or movement speed reduction effect. So yet again, we're seeing a great race class combination here for any class that is slippery, i.e. mages, rogues, monks. I think just classes that are easy to get away from you now are allowed to get away from you even quicker. And I think this is why you do see a lot of gnome class race combinations, regardless of the fact that it is funny. But there's actually some great usefulness there because of Escape Artist. Still a strong talent for such a tiny little race. Arcane Resistance reduces arcane damage taken by 1%. Engineering Specialization and Engineering skill is increased by 15. Have your Expansive Mind, which does go cross-class. And what I mean by that is for Rogue here, we're looking at the maximum energy is increased by 5%. If we were to switch over to a warrior, the maximum rage would be increased by 5%. If we were to switch over to any intellect-based class, the mana pool would be increased by 5%. And for Death Knights, that runic power would be increased by 5%. And then lastly, we are looking at Nimble Fingers, which is a haste buff of 1%. So nothing too fancy there. Looking now at the Blood Elves. Blood Elves still hold on to Arcane Torrent, which is on a 2-minute cooldown. It does silence all enemies within 8 yards for 2 seconds and restores 3% of your mana. This does scale or change depending on your class, so Rage, Runic Power, Mana, etc., Energy. So obviously that's going to be affected depending on what class you're playing. And it does, against non-player victims, spellcasting is interrupted for 3 seconds. So against players, it's simply a silence, but against non-player, it's a silence and an interrupt. Kind of a bummer that doesn't affect PvP, which I think is when I lost interest in it, but still a cool talent nonetheless, and it looks cool. Arcane Acuity increases your critical strike chance by 1%. Arcane Affinity, enchanting skill is increased by 10. So like the Draenei, still only an increase of 10 to your profession buff there, as opposed to so many other races which get that 15. Arcane Resistance reduces arcane damage taken by 1%. Taking a look now at the Worgen. Worgen still get Dark Flight, which is on a 2-minute cooldown. Activate your true form, increasing current movement speed by an additional 40%. So basically pop it and there you take off, running a whole lot faster than you did before, thus making Worgens great druids. I feel druids and rogues, in my opinion, pretty good mages too, but just as a druid and a rogue, I feel like that 40% buff for 10 seconds there is fabulous, and it makes the slippery classes yet again even more slippery. Running wild, you drop down on all fours and basically run at mount speed. Gives you the option to do that instead of having to jump on the back of a horse or a camel if you feel. And as always, just like anything else, casting anything will remove it from you. Aberration reduces shadow and nature damage taken by 1%, so you get that double reduction. 2 forms still transforms you back and forth, and I still think the transformation from human to Worgen is one of the coolest looking things for the races. Slayer skinning skill increased by 15 and allows you to skin faster. And then lastly, Viciousness, which increases your critical strike chance by 1%. And then lastly, taking a look at Goblins. Goblins still get their Pack Hobgoblin, which summons your Hobgoblin friend. There he is. And he follows you around and basically gives you access to your bank wherever you are in the world. So you can pull stuff out, drop stuff in, and move stuff around as you need. And it's on a 30-minute cooldown. So definitely makes Goblins that ideal choice if you're going to be making a farming tune to go out and farm stuff for your profession. Kind of nifty that you can just store it in your bank and then keep on your way. Rocket Barrage and Rocket Jump. Both of these do share the same cooldown. One launches a rocket causing damage. Basically, he says it launches your belt rockets out of the enemy, dealing 2,860 fire damage. And then Rocket Jump, which basically activates it and you go jumping forward. So that one I like a lot. Rocket Jump is a lot of fun. When I was leveling a goblin back in the day, and then I got bored of my rogue and deleted it. But it's still fun. Rocket Jump is a ton of fun. I don't know how useful it is. But again, anything like that, any kind of movement speed buff is nifty. I'm a big fan of it. Best deals anywhere. This one's extremely useful. Always receive the best possible gold discount regardless of faction. So it doesn't matter what your reputation is with particular factions or rep grinding areas in the game of that sort, you're always going to receive the best and lowest prices on that. So kind of nifty, great for if you have to buy mats and materials and things like that from the vendor. You're going to get the cheapest prices, which is nice. Better living through chemistry. Alchemy skill increased by 15, and then time is money. Cash in on a 1% increase to haste. What is your cat doing? My goodness, boy. Get your cat under control. So definitely some fun, quirky ratios that you have access to as a goblin, but again, not anything necessarily game-breaking. But that's going to do it for this video. Overall, nothing too game-breaking, I don't feel like, from any of the races. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you, as always, for watching. If you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to do so. I'm sure you'll find lots of content on the channel by this point that you would be interested in. I think you would enjoy very much. So I'll catch you guys next time.